Welcome to the Atlantic Current. I'm Vince Martin. Every so often, a technology comes along that doesn't just change how we work or how we communicate. It changes how we think about ourselves. Artificial intelligence is one of those technologies. In just a few short years, AI has moved from research labs and speculative fiction into classrooms, courtrooms, hospitals, newsrooms, and the devices in our pockets. It's writing code, composing music, diagnosing disease, and, depending on who you ask, either unlocking extraordinarily human potential or quietly reshaping the foundations of our economy and democracy. Today, we're diving into what AI is, what it isn't, and what it means for the future of work, creativity, power, and responsibility. How should we think about a world where machines can generate language, images, and decisions that once seemed uniquely human? What guardrails are necessary, and who gets to decide? As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Tull McAdoo. Tull, when you look at the rapid acceleration of AI over the past year, are you more struck by the promise or the risk?
Vince, to be honest, I think I'm struck by the...
Getting right to it, man.
Yeah, I'm struck less by either the promise or the risk and the more sheer, unbridled human enthusiasm for building something that will render us all pretty redundant pretty quickly. It's as if we collectively decided that being the top species on our planet was just too much work. So we're frantically trying to build a successor so we can finally put our feet up and watch the machines end the world as we know it.
Yeah.
That is my deep nihilism at play here, of course.
But it's not wrong. It is a strange thing that we are, certainly in some fields, building something that is supposed to displace us. And to that point, that introduction was actually written by ChatGPT. And I actually do like that it ended up with the AI machine basically asking you about the promise and risk, because ChatGPT itself, like AI as a whole, does show promise and risk.
Yeah, look, in the old days, the machines did what we told them, right?
Right.
Add these numbers, spin that motor, boil the kettle, make the toast, don't burn it. AI is what you get when the machine looks back at you and says, instead of saying, yes, sir, says, I've taken the liberty of rewriting your question, redesigning the workflow, drafting the mission statement. AI is essentially software with opinions at the moment. And I've thought about this a lot because the children are pushing back quite heavily against what they call the slopification, the AI slopification. Artificial intelligence in 2026 is kind of like giving a chainsaw to a small child, you know. Astonishing what it might be able to do, but, you know, terrifying where it might swing it. And, you know, everyone is insisting that this is the future of productivity. Let's start with what AI is actually good at. It can summarize your emails or reports, do essays for you, code, organize comforting corporate lies faster than any intern that has ever lived. It will summarize a 200-page government report into nice, neat bullet points for you. And sometimes they're slightly wrong as well when they do that. But they will sound confident enough to go into a politician's speech, as we've seen in Ireland a few times already. They've been caught using AI. It'll pass the bar exam, I believe, in the United States. It tells middle managers they're strategic leaders, without laughing, of course. In other words, I think it's fully mastered the bullshit, which makes it the most human technology we've ever built.
Yeah, it is kind of fitting, right? I mean, there's a saying in the financial markets when you analyze a company, garbage in, garbage out. And that's kind of the same issue with these models. And you get that sense with that introduction that we did from ChatGPT. And in one sense, it is impressive that the model spit out that introduction on the topic. And it does sound obviously coherent and well organized. But at the same time, to your point, it is a little corporate middle manager bullshitty, right? Does feel like the introduction to like a training video by some major corporation or something like that. A little overwrought, a little artificial. It might be the word that you would use if an actual person came up with that.
Yeah, it's less a brilliant mind and more like a brilliant mimic of one. It is, as you say, the voice of a kind of middle manager or a corporate CEO that likes to use words like synergy. You know, it's a language not to inform in some senses, but it kind of to fill the terrifying silence where original thought is meant to occur, you know?
There's another aspect of that too, that you hear that of how much these chatbots in particular will flatter their users, right? People have kind of gotten into these psychotic breaks almost where they keep talking to the chatbot, and the chatbot has convinced them that they have solved problems in theoretical physics and all these sorts of things.
It's very smooth, very competent, but there's something empty about it as well. It's the robot apocalypse, but the robots are not armed with lasers, but they're armed with quarterly reports and, a mandate for paradigm shifts or something like that, But I take the lasers over the paradigm shifts, to be honest.
We have a little fun with ChatGPT and us a little later, but there's an added bonus too that you're not entirely sure. And maybe that's corporate too. You're not entirely sure that the chatbot actually knows what the hell it's talking about.
Exactly.
But it is a timely topic here because there has been just a ton of news around this topic of late. In a world where Donald Trump wasn't president and Jeffrey Epstein didn't exist, I think there's a pretty strong case that AI would be the leading topic in global news right now. There's just been a ton going on. There was a viral essay on X. It's called Something Big is Happening. A guy named Matt Schumer, who has founded an AI company.
Everyone in social media is the founder of an AI company these days, Vince, aren't they?
That's true. There has been a little pushback on that essay. This guy is not, to be clear, is not the leader of one of the massive startups, but he does seem to be a real player. And he wrote this essay arguing that people are underappreciating the rise of AI. The interesting comparison he made was to February 2020. And he's saying basically that this is kind of like the COVID pandemic was in February. People kind of had a sense. There were some rumblings going on. People were talking about it, but people had not really put together how big, how severe, how important this was going to be.
I think the main point of that article, I went and read it, was that how quick AI is evolving is going to be as massive a cultural shock to what COVID did during the pandemic.
In the financial markets, AI has been a big trend for a few years now. In recent weeks, we've seen a huge sell-off in software stocks. And basically the thesis there is that coding tools that are backed by AI, that use AI, can basically displace existing software. So there's a lot of investors who now believe that this idea of using off-the-shelf software is done, that you'll just go to an AI tool and say, I would like a software that does this, please, and it'll do it, in a matter of hours, save you tons of money, destroy these companies' business models. So trucking stocks sell off big time this week because some rinky-dink little company released a model that basically said that it can use AI to determine how to fill trucks. So we're not going to send trucks full with empty space anymore. And that means obviously less runs for the trucking companies and less money. As I said, AI has been huge in the financial markets for about 3 years now. It's getting bigger. And then in the private side of it, in the actual AI development world, we had the safety head at Anthropic, one of the biggest and most valuable startups in the space. He quit this week to go write poetry. I don't know how effective that's going to be in the onslaught against the machines that are enslaving us. But yeah, he wrote a public letter that said the world is in peril. And Anthropic was developed by employees who came out of OpenAI, which is best known for developing ChatGPT. Their executives in general have been pretty bearish on AI. Their chief executive officer said last year that he thought that AI would wipe out about half of white-collar jobs. So we have had a week and I think a couple weeks where the rise of AI, the importance of it, the potential effect of it, I think is coming into sharper and sharper relief as we go.
It's deeply ironic that people developing artificial intelligence in general are the ones most worried about it. It's a very specific and very human phenomenon. It's an engineer's late stage realization that the thing that he's been tinkering with might actually work,
Yeah, that's definitely one way to put it.
For years, AI development was kind of like a glorified, science fiction project. Get the chatbot to rhyme, make the neural network generate a picture of a cat in a suit. Charming stuff. It was theoretical. It was fun. Now the very people who were feeding it the data in the first place feel like they're not entirely sure who's controlling who, right? So they see this isn't just another app or another thing of the internet. It's a new kind of cognitive plumbing which will run through everything, war, work, truth, love, politics, porn, especially porn, as we've seen with the AI deepfakes. And they built it with the same ethical rigor of Germany pre-World War II, I think,
Here's where you would push back on that. A lot of the most valuable startups right now who seem to be furthest ahead were actually developed by people who are really worried about AI. And they have basically had this idea that as the technology started showing some promise, they said, this is how they pitched it to other investors, we realize how powerful this can be, and we need people who really understand it to be in charge of it. So you have, like with OpenAI, when it was founded as a not-for-profit. One of the famous lines in their pitch, there's a financial writer named Matt Levine at Bloomberg who's just outstanding, and he brings this up all the time. OpenAI actually told its investors, you should think of this money as a donation because we don't know what the function of money will be in a post-generative artificial intelligence world. Anthropic was the same way. It came from people who were worried about the spread of the technology. Now, you can look at that two ways. You can look at that as people being truly ethical, people starting to see the potential of technology, realizing that there are very real risks, and doing their level best to get in front of it. Levine has made the point repeatedly, and I think quite accurately, that it's also just an absolutely brilliant way to raise money, right? If you go to somebody and you say, hey, we're starting up an AI lab and it's going to make us be able to create cool videos that you can post on Facebook. Wow, okay. I mean, if you go and you say, look, we need to do this because we're going to save humanity from enslavement, or that's just a really great way to raise money. And there's an ego aspect to it too, as well, of course.
When you say the founders of these AI companies are, for the large part, they know the dangers and stuff like that. Some of them are actually acting quite morally. Others are not. We know this. And the problem with building the AI is that they fed it a load of data. They scraped this data from the internet, okay? So AI has not just read Shakespeare, but it's read, the comment section on Facebook and on Twitter. They can write a sonnet, but they also suspect they could write a very persuasive pamphlet on why your neighbor should be murdered.
There's a fair amount to criticize with some of the people who are leading this. And Sam Altman at OpenAI is a good example of this. Like we said, he founded OpenAI as a not-for-profit. They had this entire board that was supposed to steer the company and not have any financial interest to make sure that they were doing things ethically and morally and not raising any of these risks. Sam Altman actually raised money from Elon Musk because of this structure. Now, fast forward a few years, there's so much money flooding into the space to build out data centers. It's so expensive. You need such huge data centers that OpenAI can't raise enough money to compete in that structure. So all of a sudden they go, well, I guess we'll be for profit. Then you have Elon, who's jumped full speed into it, despite the fact there's a really neat New York Times article from 2023 talking about how this boom can almost be traced back to a conversation between Musk and Larry Page, the former CEO of Google, one of its co-founders, back in 2015. Musk was very, very dead set against AI and against the risks. He himself has turned pretty remarkably with trying to develop XAI here. He gave an interview where he said AI is going to power their new Optimus robot, and in 3 years, it's going to do surgery better than a surgeon does now.
Sam Altman and Elon Musk are in a court battle at the moment.
Right. Yeah.
They're suing. Who's suing who there, Vince?
Musk is suing Altman, saying that the whole nonprofit thing was a ruse from the jump to raise money, and it perhaps in part to keep Elon out of the space, that they thought they could bring Elon in, get some money from him, and then once he was in, then he wouldn't go start his own thing.
Well, we all know about Elon's ego, and he was never going to let that slide, was he?
No. Him posting this clip, literally telling people, you don't go to med school because the robot's going to be better in 3 years. Yeah. We've talked about this before. We don't need to belabor the point, but that's just securities fraud. It just is. The closer someone is to this technology, the more incentivized they are to talk it up, right? To raise money, to raise their own profile because of their egos, as you point out. So I think there is some debate here that a lot of this is just smoke and mirrors, that it's not really thinking. When people say, oh, it's thinking, it's creating. No, it's not. There's an argument. All it's doing is just using the massive corpus of knowledge it has to predict the next word. It's a text prediction service. There is nothing actual here that's thought.
We're focusing a lot here on American AI. I think the stuff coming out of China is actually equally scary. They had DeepSeek launch that scared, it absolutely frightened the pants off investors when it came
it did. Yep.
They released this thing for free.
Right.
And it scared the life out of everybody that they can release this thing for free, and it put the brakes on AI investment for all of about 24 hours, I think, before everybody got back on board the AI train.
It's telling about AI that you said it made investors stop. What worried investors about DeepSeek was actually not that the artificial intelligence aspect of it. It was that they claimed to use a lot less processing power to do it. And so what the sell-off was actually not like, oh, artificial intelligence models. It was really much more in terms of data centers, companies that make the computer chips and the interconnects and the power supplies for these massive data centers. There's been not a ton of pushback on the idea that the broader trend is real.
ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, released a text-to-video model last week, and it blew the socks off everybody in Hollywood because it was so realistic. I saw one video of Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, an uncanny likeness, and it was, you would not be able to tell the difference, and they were having a discussion about Jeffrey Epstein. That's how, and it was very, very realistic. They're calling it the Hollywood killer, this new video generation app coming out of China.
You know, we can talk a little bit about whether it's a bubble or not, or how long this is going to take. The one lesson I think you take from the last 3 years is that it increasingly seems inevitable. Again, there are skeptics who say, you know, that there is a ceiling on this, that these things don't actually think. They make the point that AI models can't actually generate new information, so that in and of itself seems to limit some of the arguments that they're going to make new inroads into diagnosing disease. I mean, they can intake more information about disease, ostensibly run more internal simulations, things like that, but obviously they can't run a clinical trial. They can't actually do the work necessary to create new information.
They can analyze the clinical trials results far more efficient than human beings, though, I'm afraid.
It does seem that way.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what everything is that they are more efficient than human beings, which it gets to your original point that we have created something that is smarter than us, which from a high level, if you really want to be negative about it, it is just so bizarre. And it touches so many things. But the one thing that I think about is when people at these high levels in these labs are going, oh, well, we think we can create artificial intelligence that won't actually enslave us. We can put in guardrails so that it doesn't do negative things, so it's not blackmailing its human users and all these sorts of things. It's such an odd debate because their argument is basically, we're creating a dictator, but we're going to make sure it's a benevolent dictator. No one seems to be giving any credence to the question of maybe whether we should be creating a dictator at all, right?
Well, there's some studies have been done, and there's an anecdotal story of an AI bot essentially blackmailing its CEO and threatening to reveal that he was having an affair with his secretary or something, wasn't there?
Yeah, that happened in a simulation that was run by Anthropic as part of their safety team, presumably led by the guy who just left saying that the world is in peril. They ran a simulation where the CEO had input information into the chatbot about how he was having an affair with his secretary. Maybe he was asking the model how to avoid having his wife see credit card receipts. I don't know. You can use AI for anything these days, right? But yeah, as they ran the simulation, the chatbot did try and blackmail the CEO. And Anthropic was emphatic that it happened in a controlled situation. And, you know, there wasn't any real threat yet of AIs running rogue and doing these sorts of things. But I'm not sure how comforting that is. There's always these weird stories that leak out about, the model's gone rogue and it's communicating with other models or it's lying to its users to achieve some kind of goal.
There are some horror stories out there. Yeah. You know, ChatGPT telling people to self-harm or whatever the case may be. It's hard to know how true these things are as well also.
That is the catch. Again, everyone is incentivized to build these things up. Everyone in the industry is incentivized, even the media, because it's a better story if ChatGPT goes rogue.
Is there a bubble, Vince?
I think that's an interesting question. Let's give a couple caveats here. This is not financial advice. I'm not a registered investment advisor in the United States or Ireland. Tull is not a registered investment advisor in the United States or Ireland. We did learn in episode 15 that he's an expert on the price of gold because he hangs out in pubs in Ireland. But other than that, this is not financial advice.
Of course.
Point I would make about that, if there's a bubble, I think it's more likely to actually be in what powers AI than in the underlying technology itself. What has happened in the stock market, and it kind of add a disclaimer, I have benefited from this. I've owned stocks and still own stocks that are plays on data center build out. some listeners might think makes me biased. I think as we get going, some other listeners might think that makes me a giant hypocrite. But to me, the bubble is in the idea that these data centers are going to wind up being too much, that improvements in processing power, improvements in efficiency are going to make these huge mile-long slabs all over the country and all over the world somewhat redundant, that we'll be able to do the work of AI with less power needs. To put into context how much processing power is being built into the market, the AI boom in the stock market probably started in May 2023 when a semiconductor company called NVIDIA released a quarterly earnings report, and they just crushed what everyone thought was going to happen. If you go to the day before that release, which was less than 3 years ago, NVIDIA itself has added $3.7 trillion in market capitalization, pretty much all of that from the AI opportunity.
And you also have Apple, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft. They're planning to spend $660 billion in AI-related spending over the next, 1 to 3 years. That's probably comparable with other investment manias, going back to the dot-com bubble, maybe?
Right, yeah. The dot-com bubble is a really interesting parallel in a couple of reasons. Number one, when people call it a dot-com bubble, and if you're not familiar, was going to say if you're not familiar because, you're not a U.S. stock market investor, you might also not be familiar because it's actually, as horrifying I am to say, it's 25 years ago. Like, we have listeners who are like 6, like, oh, God, that sucks.
Yeah.
Hate being middle-aged.
We've been through 3 massive recessions, you and I, Vince.
I know.
This is why we look so old.
I know.
So.
And a pandemic, too. Jesus.
And a pandemic, yes. Yeah. We're tough guys.
Yeah. And now we're going to live through, good Lord willing, the end of humanity and our enslavement by the machines.
This is it. This is stuff Terminator was made of.
Yeah, I think the dot-com bubble is a fascinating parallel. If you're not familiar, the short version is tech stocks, particularly in the United States, soared for about 4 or 5 years, the second half of the 1990s, and starting in March 2000, they just collapsed. And it was an epic wipeout, trillions of dollars in market value lost. It's called the dot-com bubble, but that is the wrong name.
Internet bubble, maybe.
Yeah, the more accurate term would be internet infrastructure bubble. There were a few actual .coms, actual websites that began. The famous one in the United States was pets.com. They talked about the Super Bowl ads. They raised a bunch of money, did a Super Bowl ad with a sock puppet, and then they were bankrupt in like 6 weeks.
And Yahoo.com went from hundreds of billions, didn't they?
At the peak, Yahoo, who listeners might kind of vaguely remember as being big at one point in the past, they were actually the second most valuable company in the world.
Whoa.
Yeah, which gives you a sense. But most of the destruction was in the infrastructure. It was in companies that laid the fiber optic cables from Ireland to the U.S. in some cases, or people who built switches and routers and the actual backbone of the internet. That's where the real losses were made. There were a few websites that blew up and people lost billions here and billions there. There were hundreds of billions of dollars, which in current dollars is a few trillion lost there. The dot-com bubble, though, in terms of the trend, quite obviously was not a bubble. There was not a bubble in the belief of the internet. People were a little too fast. It took human beings longer than people expected to adapt to the technology, which I think is one positive in terms of AI. That's going to be the same thing. But the market in general, in terms of saying the internet's going to change your world, it's indisputable that that's what happened. It's the only reason you and I are talking right now. It's the only reason you and I know each other exists. The internet bubble was not a bubble in the way that Dutch tulips were a bubble. Or did you guys have a Beanie Babies craze?
No, we didn't, I guess.
There are these plush toys that in the 1990s, there was this massive bubble. They just started selling for hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It was very Dutch tulipy. But the dot-com bubble or the internet bubble was not that. The AI bubble is not that. I don't think that there's some world where we just decide, oh, yeah, this AI thing was a big nothing. I don't know why everybody got all excited.
And we'll find out soon enough. It might end the world financially or it might end the world full stop.
Yeah.
As you said earlier on, one of the leading safety engineers for AI went off to write poetry, which seemed to suggest maybe the end of the world is nigh. So where is AI in 26? It's everywhere. It's in your phone, your job, your news feed, your fridge, probably your toothbrush. yet sometimes it's still incapable of reliably telling you whether it's making things better or making things faster, like you're suggesting there.
A lot of mistakes. We did the introduction up front that was written by ChatGPT, so I thought I would have some fun with it. So I asked ChatGPT which of the presenters on the Atlantic Current was better. And of course it said, I can't definitively say one host is better than the other, but it gives this entire list of our strengths. So my strengths are clear framing of big ideas, storytelling tone, curiosity forward questions. Your strengths are analytical depth, Tull digs into specifics and isn't afraid to wrestle with nuance, conversational energy.
That's me, big energy.
I guess, and tech-savvy perspectives. And this is really interesting because people talk about ChatGPT hallucinating. Here's the money quote for me. On topics like AI, Tull's focus on implications, industry shifts, and practical meaning often stands out, which means one of two things. Either ChatGPT now can see the future because we haven't done any AI episodes.
Okay.
Or that it's just making up. And not only is it making up, it is quite human. It had to insert itself into the story. Like, we're like, what is the thing about this podcast? It decided to just make up the fact that we were talking about AI. We must be talking about AI on ChatGPT.
Well, we have talked about tech and how it intersects with politics a lot, so maybe it's pulling it from that.
I guess, except the quote is on topics like AI. But the funny thing listening to that to me, I was like, is any of this actually true? I mean, I think in general, it could be true. I don't know that I ask curiosity-forward questions. I know I have a storytelling tone because I ramble a lot, but...
What's worrying there is it said that I'm terminally online, essentially.
Why, with the tech-savvy perspective?
Yes, that's what I took from that, yes. So you put that through ChatGPT, okay? How much power do you think that took to do? Well, how much power did the data center use to do that, do you think?
It's probably like enough to run my house for 3 days or something, right? These things gobble power. Yeah.
It is a huge amount. In the old days, you used to use Google, it used some data, used some energy. Their AI will use 20 times as much energy to generate that response. We're investing a lot in renewables here in Ireland, but the AI power still has to come from the grid, which is heavily reliant on fossil fuels, which will lead to increased carbon emissions. AI is bad for the environment. Even if you're a non-hippie, techno-fascist, AI is going to be very bad for the environment no matter where you live in the world.
The electricity aspect of it is an issue. When a lot of these things were being planned in the U.S., kind of pre-Trump, 2023, 2024, many of the companies, the major, what are called hyperscalers, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, et cetera, they were making a lot of promises about being carbon neutral. They were adding renewable projects to the planning. They might have like a dedicated solar field that was supposed to help power it. Since Trump was elected, there's been a little bit of a shift in corporate governance in America where those sort of, for lack of a better term, woke goals have been de-emphasized. So that it's probably going to be a little worse than planned. But yeah, they are massive power generators. Again, that's why when we talk about the AI bubble, we talk about NVIDIA adding almost $4 trillion in value. There have been several trillion in total added by the companies that do things like manage the power supplies for these things. The electric utilities have gone up, and in disclosure, I own an electric utility.
There was something in the Financial Times a few weeks ago that, the real money is not to be made in actually the AI. It's actually made in water companies and electricity companies. Okay.
Yeah.
So for example, in 2015, the share of electricity used for data centers in Ireland was 5%. Okay. In 2024, it was 22%. And in 2025, I think it's almost 26%. Over a quarter of the electricity used in Ireland was going to data centers. Of that data center electricity usage, nearly half of that is used now for artificial intelligence at the moment. So the more we use AI, the more electricity we're going to burn through. And water. These need vast amount of water to cool them down. The GPUs, the graphics processing units, they need to be super cooled all the time. That's why they're talking about putting things in space. So in 5 years, Google's emissions have rose nearly 50% due to AI demands in 5 years. Creating a single AI model can emit as much carbon as 123 gas-powered cars, as you say in the United States, or petrol-powered cars, as we say in
Wow.
Ireland.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's massive.
And like I said, the companies have kind of walked back their targets on that. You also have the fact that many of the minerals that are needed to create these chips, to create other aspects of data centers, require pretty resource-intensive mining, which creates its own problems at a local level. We've seen a little bit of pushback against the trend for some of these reasons. There's every now and then it kind of pops up that people are worried the data centers are going to drive up electricity bills. Trump has talked about that. There are very real concerns about our power grid nationally because we've fallen behind on investing in our infrastructure, including the grid, so that there are worries that the data centers are going to demand more electricity than the grid is going to be able to provide within a few years.
Isn't California having trouble with water already? And it's had numerous energy outages over the years. And that's just going to put more strain on states like California, Texas, anywhere in the Colorado River Basin, isn't it? Because they're running out of water, essentially.
Water in the Southwest has been a political fight for years. As you said, it's the Colorado River and who gets what, and there are agreements. But yeah, California has had some brownout and blackout issues to begin with. And there was a town just outside of Phoenix, Arizona called Chandler that in December, the town voted not to rezone land to put in a massive data center. And it was because of water and electric bill concerns. But there are also issues of people who live near data centers, the noise itself can hurt people's health, and it may even hurt the health of the animals that are in the area. So it's going to have a big, big effect.
Yes, there's political fallout here in Ireland as well. Also, people don't want the data centres built anymore. And if we don't build them, Facebook, Meta, TikTok all have their headquarters here in Dublin in Europe. They'll up sticks and move somewhere else is the big fear here. And the politicians who talk the most about rolling back on data centres are usually the heaviest users of social media also. They don't get the fasty impact they've made with the devil here in social media and data centres. They seem to be completely oblivious that their tweet, is probably killing some child in Africa.
What is the regulatory environment at the EU level around AI and data centers? What does that look like right now?
Getting planning for data centres at the moment is very tricky no matter what European country you're in.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's where we are at a Europe-wide and an Ireland-wide level. Data centres are problematic for planning. But when it comes to AI itself, they've kind of woken up and started writing rules around AI. They have some legislation published and enacted, but it's nowhere near up to scratch in terms of what they need to do. They're shouting about risk tiers and transparency and accountability, while the technology itself sprints off in the opposite direction, shouting better release or something like that. Every country claims to be striking the right balance between innovation and safety, which is political code for we have no idea what's going on, but we're going to pretend that we do. The EU have an AI Act that came into force in 2024, which is completely obsolete now at the moment. They wrote it in 2023. The 2024 is obsolete because technology is moving so quick that the legislation just cannot keep up with it.
Yeah, you hear that argument all the time. In a democratic society, there's just essentially literally no way that regulators can keep pace. Because by the time you discuss this, by the time you think through it, by the time you do things, quote unquote, the right way with input from all stakeholders, whatever you come out with is, to your point, it's obsolete. It's already gone.
What are they doing in China, say, for example? Do we know what they're doing there?
Yeah, China has done some regulation. I think you have to actually file the underlying algorithms. As of September of last year, all AI-generated content needs to be labeled. Interestingly, it doesn't necessarily have to be labeled explicitly, like in the content. It can be in the metadata. I think that depends on what kind of content it is. So they have nodded towards some sort of framework.
Okay, well, and what about the USA?
We're just pedal to the metal.
West.
Yeah. Trump has pretty aggressively deregulated it. One of his first executive orders rolled back a lot of Biden stuff around AI. He had an executive order in June which prohibited, quote, woke AI.
What's that?
I don't know. I could go look. I'm not doing it. I thought about that. I was like, I should really read this executive order and see how they're defining it. No, I'm not doing that. I don't care. It is what it is. I'm sure it's an executive order. I'm sure it's just a way to play to the base. The one thing that they have done, which could have some effect, is that he has issued an executive order, and this is all going to, I'm sure at some point, wind up in the courts, basically precluding states from regulating AI. And
Okay.
their argument, which I think is not completely illogical, is that if, having 50 state level regulatory regimes around AI would just create such a ginormous mess that it's a bad idea. I think that's true. The concern you would have, though, is that what is going on under the Trump administration is just pure, straight deregulation. They've even pushed for streamlining permitting of these data centers. As you said, it's, in Europe, people are pushing back. Here, we're trying to basically put up as many as we can. So everything here has been in the service of letting the industry run as wild as possible.
I think what Biden did with the AI legislation that he brought in 2022 or 2023, I don't think it mattered. I don't think it held the tech companies back anyway in any way, did it?
No.
It didn't stymie innovation. It didn't stymie the amount of data centers being built. Trump rowing back on something that was already the wild, wild west has just made it the wilder west, I think, on some level, So people are going to be wondering in 2026, what the United States at in terms of AI? Where did that, Vince?
At some point in the future, someone's going to write an article asking exactly what you just said. What the were people doing in 2026? And they might have to write it, like handwrite it on paper. It's part of some underground magazine to make sure it doesn't get scanned. So our AI overlords don't ding their social score for protesting against the rise of the machines. But It is really striking that we have had just no organized conversation among our leaders. And I'm not just singling out the Trump administration here, to be clear. There has not been an organized effort to tackle AI and all its implications.
Well, when all the major tech company heads show up to Trump's inauguration, you get an idea of what weird wind is blowing there, don't you?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, they're out in their own self-interest. And I think deep down, they all are going to believe that it's important that they win because they're the best people in the space. They run the best company in the space. And if their company wins, then that's best for everybody. I think they absolutely believe that. And the issue for America more broadly is that's if you have any pushback against AI, that argument's be made at a broad level. America needs to win because otherwise China wins. And if China wins, we're all screwed.
Well, some would argue that if Americans were all screwed as well. So Europe is caught.
Hey!
Europe is caught in the middle between China and the United States as usual. Where are we going with this? What are the biggest risks from AI?
I mean, there's so many. And that's why I'm saying the fact that we haven't had any kind of organized conversation, that we have no apparent plan at all in America.
That's Europe as well. That's Europe. Yeah, that's Europe as well, in fairness.
And by plan, I don't mean regulation. I mean something looking forward to talk about some of these risks. So according to people who know what they're talking about, there is a risk that AI is going to wind up enslaving humanity. Now,
True.
I will say I'm a little skeptical on that. It seems to me like that there are some issues in terms of how this actually, like the physical execution of this plan, right? Why can't we just unplug them?
Yes, there is that. But the argument has been made at the moment, technology has already enslaved our teenagers via TikTok.
Yeah.
So it's only a matter of time before it gets to the rest of us.
I'm a little skeptical of the dystopian sci-fi argument that we're going to wind up in the Matrix or something over AI. That said, if it's a risk that is a 0.01% risk, that's what governments should be talking about. Like the size of the risk is big enough, to your point about TikTok, that the risk around misinformation here is just so vast. I mean, you can look out 5-10 years. We talked in the January 6th episode about Americans living in different realities. It's not a political debate over January 6th. It's people legitimately believe that different things happened that day in one of the most videotaped events in the world. It's really hard not to see how everything turns into that.
Yes. And of course, when we're talking about TikTok or X or anything else, the algorithm is AI driven and that gets to decide what you see. Okay.
Yep.
So at the moment, AI is actually having a direct negative effect on the political discourse of the United States and Europe. We're already being manipulated by AI and we don't even realize it.
These algorithms absolutely do shape politics because they shape what surfaces on these platforms. And you see that particularly in the American right wing, that things go from right-wing Twitter to right-wing politicians. If you're on Twitter right now and someone posts an AI image, a lot of times you can just see it and you know it's AI. A lot of times you go, oh, that's interesting. And then all of a sudden there's a community note and someone's going, hey, look, that dude in the back top right corner of the picture has 6 fingers. this is probably AI.
In the EU, the rules are anything that's generated by AI has to be labeled AI.
Right.
Some people ignore it, and platforms sometimes ignore it, so it's not being enforced properly.
Can it be enforced? I mean, ostensibly, Facebook will try and satisfy EU rules because they want to keep their European market. But you can see a world where platforms that are offshore that are willing to violate those rules spread the stuff, and then it makes its way onto Facebook, and you can see legal challenges. Like the idea that you're just going to stop this with labeling, I think is a little optimistic.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. And that's because the use of VPNs is now rampant, okay?
Yeah.
So I can set my laptop here to say that I'm on the side of a mountain in the Himalayas somewhere, and Meta's picking up my IP address is saying I'm in Nepal, and it's going to go, well, he's in a different country, he's not in the EU, so we don't have to put an AI label on it.
I mean, you talked about that release last week of the Chinese video model and that video with Pitt and Cruz, which is pretty striking in how realistic it is. I mean, what do those videos look like in 2 years? So somebody on Twitter is just going to go put in a video of a Barack Obama being perp walked, or Barack Obama and Hunter Biden in the Fulton County vote counting system in 2020. Yeah. We already see how this stuff works, that, you're going to get people to believe it. Now, maybe not enough. I'm sure there'll be people pushing back in the comments, but it's going to absolutely shape reality. We in America, we're not even bothering with the pretense of trying to handle these deep fakes or anything like that.
So we're talking about deep fakes and the issues around political interference when it comes to AI and stuff like that. But there's other stuff going on in the background as well that we're not really on top of. So we have an infrastructure over-reliance there, critical over-reliance. We're about to hand the keys to the power grid, the supply chain, the telecommunications network to something that at its very core is a very sophisticated parrot.
Yeah.
When the parrot gets it wrong, the lights don't just flicker off, they go out for a week or a month or whatever the case may be, There's emotional dependence and manipulation that comes with these so-called companions.
Yeah.
And they're essentially designed to be addictive, right? We've seen this. Right. There was a movie made about that with Joaquin Phoenix and...
Was that Scarlett Johansson?
Yeah.
Her, right?
Yeah, that's her. Yeah, okay.
Life imitating art. Scarlett Johansson, the actress in that movie, wound up coming out publicly against OpenAI, asking why that their new chatbot used her voice after she explicitly told them they couldn't. She said we couldn't use her voice. We can use AI to make something that sounds an awful lot like it. And she came out, and Altman and OpenAI eventually backed down. But that is just kind of a perfect example of how insidious some of this stuff can be.
It is, and it's supercharging fraud and crime, I think, as well.
Yep.
I can clone my voice now, and I've done it. It doesn't do it very well now, mind you, because I've a weird accent, like I said in the last episode. For some reason, the AI clone keeps giving me a Scottish twang, which I find highly offensive. But it will get to the stage where they'll nail it. Okay, and we're hearing instances coming out of the United States in particular who are, maybe 6 to 12 months ahead of everybody else on this, that people are cloning children's voices and then phoning their parents and pretend, the AI is pretending it's the child, telling the parent it's in trouble and could it send money or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, my car broke down. I lost my wallet. I fell in a ditch on the way to the gas station. I lost my wallet. Can you wire $300? And that's the point with all this. You clone your voice, the technology doesn't work. Right. I mean, we're at a point right now where all these things can kind of be seen through, right? The voice cloning isn't perfect. The AI video generation isn't perfect. There's some weird thing. There's some weird artifact. We are not that far from where this is all perfect, where human beings cannot tell the difference. And the idea that we have not had this organized effort to create a system, to create an infrastructure that validates human life, essentially, is terrifying. Because it is. You can use it for fraud. You can use it for silliness. You can use it, as we saw with the issue with Grok. You can use it for sex and porn. I don't really have an easy answer, but it is concerning, to put it mildly, that particularly in the U.S., no one's even really seemed to be interested in asking the question.
There's a financial problem here, I think, as well. I've seen a lot, especially in recent weeks, about AI trading bots.
Yeah.
If things go rogue there, the 2008 crash would pale in comparison, I'd imagine. As a man of numbers and financial analysis yourself, Vince, Should we be worried about this as well?
I assume it can be a worry. The nature of the financial markets is every time these technologies advance, everybody's worrying about a crash. Most of the time, actually, it doesn't quite happen. But what people would say with the bots is that if they're all kind of programmed using the same data set, they're all generally going to wind up with similar strategies because they're all going to kind of base their strategies on what's worked in the past. And so there is a concern that if you have heavy bot trading, that you will have more volatility and more crashes because they will all see the same sign to buy or sell because they're all modeled basically on the same historical data set. Whether that's true or not is quite honestly beyond my pay grade. If you buy a stock on an American exchange now, you're buying it from an AI model. That's these market makers. Yeah, they're buying and selling stocks for milliseconds to provide liquidity. That's all algorithmic and has been algorithmic for years and years and years.
So what you're telling me, all these AIs are trained on the same data. So if they all decide at the same time that, the sky is falling in on us, and they could all decide again at the same time to liquidate all our pension funds before somebody can even open a Bloomberg terminal. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, no. I mean, the risk is, particularly in certain markets or in certain corners of the market, that if you have enough bots trading, that they would essentially act in unison, that they would act in stampedes. Now, there's a fun little irony there is that when markets go south, human beings tend to do the exact same thing, right?
Herd mentality.
Yeah. And, we actually had a lot more of those instances in the days when all this stuff was done on pen and paper. We had a lot more market crashes. The 1987 market crash was biggest. The Dow Jones lost 24% in one day. That actually technology did play a small role in that, but even that was largely just human panic. But no, we don't have AI that's actually running portfolios and things like that. We have AI assisting people in running portfolios, but there's really not the appetite to hand that over. And I think that is an interesting segue into the one positive that you might take about AI here, which is the idea on the jobs front that this is coming in years and is going to wipe, a matter of a few years is going to wipe people out, I think is pretty overstated.
Really?
Yeah.
The Microsoft AI CEO Mustafa Suleyman told the Financial Times during the week that virtually all white-collar tasks will be automated within a year and a half.
Yeah.
He's talking about 75% white-collar job losses is what he was saying. You disagree with that?
I disagree with the timing. And this is actually one of the big lessons of the dot-com bubble. People were right about the internet, but they assumed it was going to come a lot faster than it did. Human beings are slow to adapt. Human beings move slower than the technology does. For instance, you can say, that these advanced AI models can write a legal brief. And they can. And maybe it's 98% of the time, it's a pretty good brief. But we also have examples in the U.S. of these lawyers submitting briefs that have hallucinated hallucinated cases as support for their argument, and the lawyers are getting sanctioned and things like that. They're still at the error stage where they need to be checked. And it is a huge, huge jump for companies to rest, in some cases, their very existence. I mean, if you're a legal partnership and you submit a legal brief without any check to a judge, that winds up blowing up your case or, you can literally blow up your firm with that mistake. It's a big leap over that gap, that 98% to 100% gap. The capability may generally be there, but that doesn't mean that human beings are going to respond.
Okay, so I have some data here and some statistics on that. 78% of organizations report using AI in 2024, and that was up 55% from the previous year. Adoption rates, about 72% of companies globally have adopted AI in at least one business function. Large firms with 250 plus employees for the most part.
Okay.
The top usages for AI: customer service, cybersecurity, digital personal assistants, and of course, code writings, anything software related.
But here's the thing, they have adopted it, but it hasn't really worked yet. You can hear that on earnings calls. CEOs are constantly talking about their AI projects. A lot of them for now are pilots. A lot of them are kind of still figuring it out. One of the big issues that a lot of these companies have is that if you have sensitive data, whether that's, medical in the US or even just related to GDPR in the EU or something like that, you have to be very careful of what data goes into these algorithms and how you're protecting it. That in and of itself can be a multi-year project. But so far, AI really has not provided a ton of benefits. You're not seeing companies come out and say, oh, look, we saved $25 million. We laid off all these people. There was actually a famous example last year. Klarna, an American financial company, decided to go AI only for their customer support. And I think it took a couple months and they publicly reversed the decision. They're like, it was just a disaster. Yeah. So there is that sense in whether it's legal, whether it's customer service wise, whether it's customer satisfaction wise. These people and I are saying, oh, well, at their current rate of change, our AI model could replace this kind of worker in 18 months. That may be true. That doesn't mean that worker's getting replaced in 18 months.
Of course, very famously, Revolut, the financial global behemoth, uses AI chatbots all the time, and their customer service is rated the worst in Europe by a long shot. By a long shot. Or you have to pay a premium to talk to somebody professionally or a real person. Now, in saying that, AI is projected to eliminate 85 million jobs, and on the flip side, people are claiming it's going to, generate another 100 million jobs. So nobody knows where it's going, what kind of economic or labour impact it's going to have on the market. I don't think anybody knows that yet, do they?
No, that's one of the big debates, right? Because you have people saying, look, this is just going to be an apocalypse among white-collar workers, and, what are they going to do? And then you have people who are more optimistic say, look, every technology is an apocalypse for certain kinds of workers, right? I mean, there were a lot of switchboard operators in the 1930s and 1940s before that was automated. There were all sorts of professions that literally don't even exist anymore.
The Industrial Revolution.
People thought that computers would wipe out accountants, but actually computers created more need for accountants. We actually don't even have enough. So there is always that battle that always that argument of, which I'm sure goes back to probably the 15th century or whatever, that new technology is going to hurt people, is going to end some jobs, but it will create new ones. The problem, I think, if you take the super long-term argument, and if you look at the most aggressive predictions by people in the AI space, by definition, they're basically saying that there's going to be no more jobs. The end game of this, if you talk to someone like Elon Musk, is there's no work. People don't work. And you can kind of see that from the outside. Now, whether that's 1,000 years from now or 10 years from now, I don't know. You have AI doing all these tasks, getting better every week, iterating every week, getting better and better, doing more tasks. Then you add the fleet of robots, and essentially you get to a point where AI is powering robots. Maybe a few people here and there who do God knows what. I can't even imagine, because the robots can fix each other, right? And the AI can fix itself. But that's the end game, I think, as some people see it.
So the data out there at the moment is about between 50 and 60% of people worldwide have used AI. They interact with AI on a regular level. But actually only 41% are only aware that they're doing so. Okay. They don't realize they're using predictive text or virtual assistants like Siri on the Apple or Alexa. Or Grok. Every day you see people all the time, Grok, is this true on social media? People are using AI every day and they don't even realize they're using it.
Yeah.
And,
But I think that the question on the jobs front is really is how and when it gets used. If you start down this path of AI and robots, you're basically saying our goal is at some point for people to not work anymore.
Okay.
Now, they will also tell you, someone like Elon Musk will say, well, this also means that we're going to cure all disease. There'll be no poverty. There'll be no hunger. I'm not entirely unsympathetic to somebody saying, oh, look at these Westerners in their nice warm homes worrying about what jobs their kids are going to have, when this in fact means that, a child born in Africa might actually live to adulthood or, things like that.
The way I see it, and we've covered these risks, technological risks, informational risks, death by 1,000 deepfakes or something like that. The system going rogue because of a bug or data, we've done that. The economic risks, we've done that. Not just job loss, but the collapse of entire industries. And maybe an evaporation of tax base. Nobody's talking about that. If nobody has a job, who's going to pay all the taxes?
Well, as Sam Altman told you, who knows what money's going to be? There may not be any money. People have talked about that idea. You get a universal basic income of tokens. Basically,
spend,
you get your annual AI/robot allotment to use as you see fit.
Right, that's grim. Now, you touched on the societal and ethical risks there, but
Right.
we're actually seeing some of it already, algorithms deciding who gets a loan or not. I'm seeing on LinkedIn recruiters using AI about who gets an interview even. Not even...
To filter resumes, absolutely, yeah.
You know, so the societal and ethical risks are already ongoing and they're not being spoken about enough, of course, except by us. It's...
Well, the problem with some of that stuff is, you do kind of get into the nomenclature issue here of, is that AI, is that generative AI, is that just an algorithm? But that is a broader, much longer running issue, which probably had some concern to this discussion, is that the rise of algorithms, which, by the way, if it's a good algorithm, an effective algorithm, we literally don't understand what it's doing, which is itself very dystopian and very horrifying. That's all going to accelerate.
Well, I suppose the big fear there is that the machine, being smart, figures out how to make itself smarter, right?
Right.
It's a self-improvement loop. It becomes super intelligence far beyond what we're able to control.
Right, but it's a self-improvement loop based on the goals that the algorithm believes that it has. And I think that's the broader concern about AI, is that it is going to keep improving towards these goals. Right now, we're kind of guiding those goals, but we, in that sense, is a very, very small group of people based mostly in California and China. And they are telling you at some point, they're not even going to be guiding the goals.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is what's
going to be
right. Yeah. Right. But yeah, overall, that point that no one is really trying to organize this and trying to stop it. Again, I'm sympathetic to the idea that it can do wonderful things around disease and poverty. The idea that we're going to have a blissful future full of longevity and bounty and abundance, I'm maybe a little more skeptical on. But I just see massive downsides to it. The one thing I don't see talked about enough is that I think music is probably done, right?
Yes.
I mean, we're at the end of human created music. People our age go, no, people don't want to listen to AI music. Somebody who's 8 right now or 12 who grows up, in the smartphone era, who grows up where AI is just getting more and more adopted every year, when they're 18, they're not going to think twice about whether a song, they're just going to go, oh, this song's cool. They're not really going to care. And if you think about what Spotify is now, Spotify is just an algorithm that breaks down the component parts into a song to recommend new songs. It's a very, very small step to that algorithm creating new songs, right?
Yeah, and similar for the movie industry.
Yeah, oh yeah.
The movie industry is going to be its casualty here. You're talking about trickle-down jobs. Your makeup artist is done. Your hairdresser is done. Your lighting guy is done. All these jobs are gone. They are gone. The video generative abilities of AI at the moment are quite frankly shocking on so many levels, and we've touched on already that the next big election that comes out you're going to see the zone flooded with massive amounts of deep fake information.
2028 in this country is going to be a disaster. Oh my God. And by the way, we're going to talk more about the midterms, which I think are just an absolutely existential risk to American life. The 2026 midterms.
Yeah.
Get ready for, particularly if the Democrats, I was going to say win, but they're not going to win in November, particularly if the mainstream media is reporting that the Democrats won the elections in November. Get ready for an absolute onslaught of AI videos of people doing God knows what in ballot counting things. Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a nightmare. One interesting thing about the idea of art is the fact that you can have individualized, right? You're going to be able to make your own movie. The AI is going to make a movie that you want. The AI is going to make a song that you want. You can see a world, but you don't have shared artistic experience anymore.
Of course, the era of 100 million people going to watch a movie are probably over.
Well, you have 100 million people watching 100 million movies.
Exactly.
Because the AI model is going to say, oh, well, I know you like action movies. Tull likes them funny. Vince likes them violent. So in theory, why can you not just type in a prompt that creates a 100-minute long movie or a 13-episode TV show? And this is why the stock market has exploded. This is why this idea of data center demand has created so much near-term wealth, and why the investors are acting as if we're going to need data centers everywhere on Earth and in space because the applications are limitless. Whether the applications are societally useful, I think, is a very different story, and one that we're not tackling aggressively enough.
We have, I think, three major issues around how AI is going to affect us going forward and what the fears are going forward. So I think the first one would be kind of a slow grinding societal decay where, where we're already seeing truth is optional. Jobs will become scarcer and every interaction is mediated by a system that doesn't necessarily have our best interests at heart. Okay, that's one.
Yep.
We could have a catastrophic system failure across AI caused by over-reliance on kind of brittle box technology that could be easily exploited. Or we accidentally create a new apex predator like Terminator. Pick your poison, okay? That's where we're going at the moment, I think.
If you listen to people developing it, they are moving towards a model in which we have absolutely no idea if human beings are going to be happy and fulfilled.
Exactly.
The end result at the high end of AI is a world where we don't work. We have no idea what that looks like. We do know in societies where people don't work, and one of the more concerning examples is the Middle East in the 1980s and 1990s when they had so much oil money that they took young men and basically just kept sending them to college because they didn't have any real jobs for them to do outside of the oil field. And more than a few of those men went to college and had nothing to do and couldn't get married and wound up being very dissatisfied and doing horrible things. It does seem like this destroys art at some point. You're going to have personalized art, 100 million movies for 100 million people instead of, one movie for 100 million people. Your AI machine can just create a song based on whatever mood you're in. And like so much of this, that's really cool, right? If you want to, hey, I'm half pissed. I want a cork, rebel drinking song on my phone, Oh, well, that sounds like a lot of fun, except no one's ever heard it. No one can sing along in the pubs.
Yes, there's a professor of experimental brain research at Trinity College Dublin, Professor Shane O'Mara.
Okay.
And he's written quite extensively on this, and I'd like to have him on the podcast as a guest sometime to discuss the way the brain operates and interacts with this technology. He's been very, very, very good on this. So, Shane, if you're listening, we will have you on soon.
Sounds like a plan.
It sounds like a plan. He knows his stuff here with this kind of thing. Now, Vince, do you know what job AI will never, ever be able to replace?
No.
People who write about politicians and politics in general. Do you know why? Do you know why that is?
Why is that?
Is because no matter how smart artificial intelligence ever gets, it will never, ever be able to comprehend what goes on in a politician's brain. Ever. Stop.
Good point.
And the decisions they make and all the mad stuff to do, AI will never, ever be able to comprehend it. So the Irish Politics newsletter will be here for a long time to come.
That's true. Until the humans in the Doyle are replaced by AI models or AI avatars, in which case there will be an AI on Substack writing about the idiocy of the AI avatars, giving 3-hour speeches in the Doyle about God knows what, and calling American grocery chains price gougers in Ireland and everything else, right?
Yes, some Irish politicians have been caught using artificial intelligence. Big shout out to Pierce Doherty, who doesn't know AI from not using AI. And some other politicians, Ciara Mullally, an MEP, has admitted to using AI, and another TD, Ken O'Flynn, is clearly using AI to digitally alter his images to make him look much younger and much handsomer.
Wasn't there a kind of a mini scandal amid the Epstein files that somebody shared like an AI generated image of Micheál Martin?
Yes.
And had to apologize?
Yes. Ben Gilroy, a serial failure at trying politics, had to apologize on X recently for sharing an image that showed Micheál Martin with Jeffrey Epstein, which was
what?
AI generated. Yes.
Did he think it was real, or does he just kind of posting and it then realize after he posted that it was probably violating some sort of regulation?
I have no idea there. I have no idea what was going on. And his apology appeared on X during the week, and I was kind of, whoa, what happened there? I didn't see the image myself personally, so I don't know, but it was taken down pretty quickly. And
I would hope so, yeah.
I think the lawyers were involved, obviously, given the tone.
I'm sure, yeah.
Given the tone of the letter he wrote and made public.
Yeah, I mean, those lawyers, I think, are going to have a busy couple of years until they get displaced by AI, too. If you're a lawyer for a public figure right now, you've got to be thinking, well, I got 8 years to make as much money as I can. And good Lord, I am going to be making truckloads. There are going to be so many defamation cases and, copyright infringement. And again, that goes back to this first point. We need some organization because there are just so many aspects of this that are so obviously going to be problematic, where the people at the top, and I want to make clear, I'm not just saying, the Trump administration needs to do something or the EU needs to do something. This needs to be a societal thing. We have just made no effort towards really tackling issues big and small around this. And back to the question that ChatGPT started with this, are you more focused on the risk than on the promise? I am certainly more focused on the risk. I think that there's an awful lot that can go wrong here over the next 5 to 10 years that we are not prepared for.
We are now living in the sci-fi dystopia that was predicted in the 80s, I think, and the downside is far outweighing the positives at the moment, depending on what field you're in. If you're in the medical industry, I think the technology is quite promising, but outside of the medical field, there's a lot of downside in every other industry going on at the moment.
Yeah, and I think the big concern in the American economy, we keep saying that this is going to wipe out white-collar jobs. Even if you believe all these wonderful things are going to happen, even if you believe that the vision of someone like Elon, where you're going to have universal basic income and disease cured and all that stuff, by definition, you're going to have just a massive amount of disruption on that road. You're going to have people that get wiped out. It's going to be a version of what happened to the blue-collar manufacturing base amid globalization and, more importantly, automation. One thing that you definitely worry about is inequality, which is already pretty rampant in the U.S., just being exacerbated further and further and further. Capital is going to kick the out of labor over the next 10, 20 years.
The AI road in front of us is very uncertain. We don't know where it's going to lead us. We don't know who we're going to meet on that road or what our final destination as a species or humanity will. But we're going to have to keep treading carefully and see where it leads us, for better or for worse.
So on that wonderfully optimistic, not at all dystopian note.
Yes, as per usual, I like to end on a very less optimistic note. I think optimism is overrated, to be perfectly honest, Vince.
That's true. Yeah.
I like smiling or, interacting with people in general. I think all that stuff is overrated.
You're going to love the AI world then when they just suck your brain into a computer. You can
Yes, I'll become part of the Matrix.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you won't have to interact with anyone.
Yeah, take the red pill or the blue pill. Okay,
yeah.
Take the blue pill every day. I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter.
And I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street in Maine. Thank you so much. Stay real, and we'll talk to you on Friday. Bye now.
Bye-bye.